So we tried all kinds of ideas. Probably 12 different prototypes, and they all failed. Because we were kind of caught up in this idea that a good game needs to be fun, and a fun game needs to have action that comes with a depth. So it takes time for you to master, and it will be challenging when you're mastering this action. But when you have this kind of mechanics, this is what the player will say. We did play tests, right? They were playing the game. They say, well, this game is really fun. But when they are playing, whether they're doing good or bad, they were saying these words, they just don't really fit with this kind of emotions, right? And it's just certainly not working. So when you create feelings, as a visual artist, you know how to use the combination of color or composition to make people feel a certain way. As a composer, you know how to use the notes and rhythm to make people feel a certain way. But as an interactive designer, which essentially is the new frontier of video game, how do you use interaction to make people a certain way? Right now, we know a lot about how to make people feel fun, but we almost have no vocabulary in the rest of the spectrum, in this academia form. So I think the difficult part of making a difference is that you have to constantly remind yourself that what you thought was right or what you remember was right is not necessarily correct. And you have to keep fighting with yourself to reject that in order to get something. So for the near future about video games, I have these data just to give you a glance at what could happen. There are more and more adults playing games these days, not only in the number but also in the percentage. And you can imagine the desire for more mature experience is out there. And right now you can sense that because there's a rise of the indie game movement where there's a bunch of people in their garage trying to use game to express something, to say something with this medium. And when you think about what can interest in adults, you can do it two-way, either intellectually stimulate them or emotionally touching them. What's interesting is right now this new word which is called social, right? It's the new trend. When you put all three of them together, you can pretty much map everything you do in your life related to entertainment around this diagram. So on the top left, you have the extreme intellectual just reading the newspaper. You are simply absorbing informations. Well, if you want something purely emotional, that's probably music, right? But then if you want to have something combining the two, it's like novels or movies. And then people will say, well, why don't you have something in the center that captures all of them? That would be the best-selling thing. And in fact, it is pretty much true, because the experience I can think of would be Disneyland. You and your family going there. It's a very social experience, but it's also a very emotional ride, and kids can probably learn something meaningful. Or a museum, very much the same, but probably more focused on the intellectual side. And the social side I can think of is probably like a church. So in the past, games were very good at combining intellectual and emotional stimulation into a gameplay experience. And then people noticed the internet is penetrating the market. Every year, there's more people getting online. They were like, okay, it's a good time to add some social elements to games. And what happened is that rather than mixing the social element with the gameplay, most people just duct taped some kind of online connectivity to an existing gameplay that's existed 20 years ago. And really, to have effective social communication between people, you really need to not only have the words, but the tone of voice. You really need to be able to see the other person's face, body language, to really have a higher level of communication. This is World of Warcraft, which is one of the most popular online games right now. But if you look at what they do with the social communication, first, you don't look at people's face because there's nothing on them. Secondly, the only contact you can have with a person is through a chat box. I actually know the designer for this chat box. He said he has no experience in designing chat box. He just combined ICQ and IRC together. So basically, this chat box is a 12-year-old technology they use in the modern game. And if you look at the rest of the screen, they are all used for combat, which is very established gameplay. And I think in the future, right now in the game, because so many people are only focusing on the primal feelings, when people do communicate with each other, they talk very primal things. And they do express feelings, they express very primal feelings. I think in the future, to design real social gameplay, you want to have a skill, a gameplay that is actually useful for your normal life. If you're socializing with a player, you're really doing something that's similar to the real life, rather than having a gameplay that you never get to use in the real life, right? I mean, how many of you actually get a chance to do that? So imagine in the near future, the technology allows us not only to be able to type words to each other, but also talk to each other, or maybe see the facial expression. Then you can have a deep level of communication. And imagine a future where a game is not just about the primal feelings, but more sophisticated feelings, and you will be talking about more sophisticated emotions in the game. Then, like we have seen dramas like Lost. You can actually have a virtual space which you put a bunch of people on an island, and having these interesting dynamics between people, the players, to roll out. It would be so fun just to watch it if it's a game. You can also have more direct competition like American Idol, or I don't know what's the equivalent version in Hong Kong here, maybe Hong Kong Idol or something like that. And Disneyland is totally possible, just having experience which you and your family can go into a game world to have a good time, to share some feelings, and to learn something. I mean, this is totally possible. Or something like a church. I think in the future, interactive entertainment is not just entertainment, leisure, or food, but it could also potentially give you something at a spiritual level. And I just can't wait to see that future to come. And that's pretty much my talk. Thanks.